The observation deck of the Talon's Pride had fallen silent. Curadan Ironpaw, Alpha of the Vraxian Third Fleet, stood with his arms crossed over his massive chest, watching the human female with an intensity that made his subordinates shift uncomfortably. His amber eyes tracked every movement she made in the communal habitat below. Rhea Voss knelt among the cubs, her small frame dwarfed by the young Vraxians tumbling around her. To Ceradan's people, she should have been prey. Humans were soft, weak, their bodies fragile compared to the armored hides and razor claws of the Vraxian species. They had no natural weapons, no thick fur to protect them from the cold void, no fangs to rend flesh. When the Galactic Council had first introduced humanity to the wider universe, the Vraxians had laughed, politely as diplomacy required, but laughed nonetheless. Curadan was no longer laughing. "She should not be down there," growled Takesh, his second in command. "The cubs are approaching their aggression phase. If they turn on her—" "They won't," Curadan interrupted, though his claws flexed involuntarily. Below, two of the larger cubs, Vrek and Shorn, if Curadan remembered correctly, had begun the ritual challenge dance. It started playfully enough, as these things always did. A nip here, a swat there. But Curadan could see the tension building in their young muscles, the way their ears flattened against their skulls. In moments, this would escalate into true combat. At their age, the cubs didn't yet understand restraint. They would tear at each other until blood was drawn, until dominance was established. Rhea continued singing, that strange human custom, some melody in her native tongue. She was stitching something, her fingers moving with practiced precision through fabric. She appeared utterly unconcerned. Vrek lunged. Shorn met him midair, and the two cubs became a snarling ball of fur and claws. The other cubs scattered, knowing to give the combatants space. Curadan's hand moved instinctively toward the emergency override that would seal the habitat, but he forced himself to wait. He needed to see this. The fight intensified. Vrek managed to sink his teeth into Shorn's shoulder. Shorn howled, a sound of genuine pain, and raked his claws across Vrek's face. Blood spattered onto the floor. The cubs were lost to their instincts now, the red haze of territorial fury consuming their barely developed minds. Rhea set down her stitching. She didn't stand immediately. She didn't shout or panic. She simply placed the fabric aside with careful deliberation, as if she had all the time in the world. Then she rose to her feet with a fluid grace that Curadan had learned to recognize as deceptive. Humans moved like that when they were about to do something dangerous. She walked toward the fighting cubs, not quickly, not slowly, just purposefully. "By the ancestors," Takesh whispered, "she's going to get herself killed." Curadan said nothing. His every instinct screamed at him to intervene, but something held him frozen. Perhaps it was the way she moved. Perhaps it was the memory of the last time he'd underestimated this particular human. Rhea reached the cubs just as Vrek managed to flip Shorn onto his back, jaws opening wide for a throat strike that would end the fight and possibly end Shorn's life. The cub was too young to pull such a blow. What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Rhea's hand shot out, that soft, pink, clawless hand, and wrapped around the back of Vrek's neck. Her other hand caught Shorn's scruff simultaneously. She lifted, and suddenly both cubs were dangling in the air, their back legs kicking uselessly. They outweighed her, Curadan knew. Vrek alone was at least 60 pounds of muscle and fury. But it wasn't the lifting that made Curadan's blood run cold. It was the precision. Her fingers had found the exact pressure points at the base of their skulls, the vulnerable junction where spine met cranium. Curadan could see it from where he stood, the specific placement, the controlled grip. She wasn't just holding them. She was demonstrating control over the most vulnerable part of their anatomy. She could snap either neck with a simple twist of her wrist. The cubs fell silent immediately, their instincts recognizing a predator far more dangerous than themselves. Rhea held them there for a moment longer, letting the lesson sink in. Then she lowered them gently to the ground, one hand still on each neck, and knelt between them. "No," she said simply, her voice carrying clearly through the observation deck speakers. "We don't hurt family." She checked Shorn's shoulder wound, her fingers probing gently, then examined the scratches on Rek's face. From somewhere in her clothing, she produced a medical kit, because of course she carried one, and began treating their injuries. The cubs sat perfectly still, subdued not by fear, but by confusion. Their instincts told them they'd just been dominated by an apex predator, but their eyes told them it was just Rhea, soft Rhea, who sang to them and taught them strange human games. How did she know? Takesh asked. How did she know exactly where to? Because humans are hunters, Karadan said quietly. We forgot that. He remembered now the reports from humanity's homeworld, a planet of predators where humans had climbed to dominance not through strength or natural armor, but through intelligence and precision. They had hunted creatures 10 times their size by understanding anatomy, by knowing exactly where to strike. They had domesticated wolves into companions through nothing but patience and the implicit threat of superior violence. Rhea finished bandaging Shorn and turned to Rek. The cub nuzzled against her apologetically, and she scratched behind his ears. Below them, the other cubs began creeping back, clustering around her again. She resumed her seat, picked up her stitching, and started singing once more, as if nothing had happened. But Karadan had seen. In that moment when her hands had wrapped around those necks, he glimpsed the truth that humanity kept carefully hidden beneath their diplomatic smiles and cultural exchanges. They were soft because they chose to be. They were kind because they decided kindness was preferable. But underneath that gentle exterior lived something that had climbed to the top of a death world's food chain, something that understood violence with a terrible intimacy and had simply chosen to set it aside. Double her security clearance, Karadan ordered, and inform the council that I'm recommending humans for Tier 1 species classification. Tier 1? Takesh's ears swiveled in surprise. But Alpha, they lack so many physical advantages. Physical advantages, Karadan repeated, still watching Rhea sing to the cubs clustered in her lap, are not the only measure of a predator. Below, Rhea smiled as Rek and Shorn curled up on either side of her, their earlier animosity forgotten. Her hands rested gently on their heads, those same hands that could have ended either life with surgical precision. Karadan finally understood why humanity had survived long enough to reach the stars. It wasn't despite their softness. It was because they knew exactly when to stop being soft.